Hi, I'm Brian Thompson. I'm product manager at ZS within our CPG analytics team.
I'm Tim Joyce. I'm a principal at ZS in Chicago. I lead our consumer practice.
Today, we're going to be talking about AI and innovation. And although we've titled this How AI is Shaping Food Innovation This Decade, really, as we put this together, we realize this is all happening right now. So excited to share what we've observed and excited to then hear from you with any of your questions, your own observations. We'll be sharing in the chat here a link to our virtual booth, and we'd love to continue to interact with you in the chat throughout the presentation. So we have a unique advantage working in consumer packaged goods in that there is an experiment being run every single day that our customers willingly participate in when we have millions of shoppers selecting from millions of possible items and spending their own real money to tell us what it is of all those items that they wanted. This is an advantage that no other industry can claim, and yet we do not yet fully take advantage of it. We have a unique opportunity now with the advent of additional compute power and algorithms to really turn this vast set of data into predictions, into prescriptions, and really change how we are using the internet and data to drive our businesses in an entirely different way. So we are at a turning point where we are going to be moving from a world of belly and descriptive analytics and into a world of predictive and prescriptive analytics. So historically, we've relied on our own intuition. Humans have had experiences. Humans have taken a guess at what might happen. You're limited by your imagination. You can predict with some accuracy. Some people may turn out to be better guessers than others, but overall, your ability to use data and have insights is somewhat limited. This changed in the 80s with the advent of Lotus 1-2-3, and then of course Excel, which we all know today, and we see different versions of it moving into Tableau. It's all still descriptive analytics. We are using CPUs to help us visualize the data, but we still need to use our own human intuition to observe the insights. What do we see here? What do we conclude from this? It's happening by us, the humans interacting with that visualized data. So we have a much larger scope of what we can reach here, but the impact is still limited by our ability to look at the data and achieve those insights. In some places in our businesses, we've started to move into now predictive analytics. We're able to use CPU power to find inputs, run regressions, and actually predict what's going to happen next with some accuracy. This is a big advantage since we now have a computer which is free from some of the biases that we bring as human observers of data, and we're able to actually get very precise predictions on very large scale. And we actually are getting to a point now where humans are taking action as a result of what the machine has predicted. However, there's still a limitation in the predictive model in that humans are designing the experiment and are setting up the direction of that outcome in order to ask the CPU a question. What we really want to get to is the final evolution of prescriptive analytics. In this world, CPUs are able to look at all data. They are able to boil the ocean since compute power is trivial to them in a way that it's much harder for us to use our brains. And actually, when a CPU is given all the data and the right set of algorithms, they're able to find things that we never could have even thought to ask them. And at that point, that's when we're really at that maximum scope, maximum impact, because we're able to take actions informed by computers in a way that we never were before. So be interested to know where folks think that their own analytics are today. We'll have a poll here in the presentation. I'd say that generally speaking from our client base, the middle feels about right. Somewhere between descriptive, there's elements of predictive. Prescriptive is happening in very small pockets. And there's still probably more belly than any of us would like to admit to. So I'm going to take a quick tour here of the history of these, and then Tim's going to talk to us about really the last column and where the future is headed in the category. So belly analytics, we all have them. They've specifically been very successful for food innovation, going back to the introduction of Flamin' Hot Cheetos, when a janitor at the Frito company took the CEO's message to think like an owner quite seriously. He had a personal preference for chili on his corn, on Mexican street corn, and he applied it to the Cheetos. He made a presentation. It became a business. He's now vice president. So a really cool story, but again, it was one person's idea that came out of their own personal experience that they applied, and it was successful at scale, but it was ultimately a guess. Once you move past the world of the belly analytics, you're into descriptive. This is the world of spreadsheets and dashboards that we live in. For food innovation, descriptive analytics stands out best with the introduction of Gatorade. When it was observed that University of Florida players were wilting in the heat, they measured that they were losing substantial amounts of water over the course of a football game. And so Gatorade was created in order to make sure that they were replacing what was lost during the game. And since then, we know how Gatorade is taken off. That goes back to, again, observation, perhaps a chart, and then the human intuition on what to do with that. So we're still in very human-centered, narrower frames of reference for how we're able to work. Predictive analytics is something that we interact with every day, whether or not we realize it. When Netflix tells us what we want to look at, when we go on Amazon.com and says, oh, folks with this in the cart might also want to buy that. Predictive analytics are actually incredibly impactful. Actually, during the height of COVID, Amazon disabled the shopping suggestions in order to reduce demand by 10%. Which they admitted to, which shocked me in many dimensions. But the ability of e-commerce has taken us here in a positive way. You might see a different price in a different zip code. You're able to get predictions in all kinds of different places. So this is a place where we're applying it well, but it's not yet something that we've really brought the data to be able to make effective predictions within. Will this product launch be extremely effective? Those conversations are still very focus group reliant. And last, the world of prescriptive analytics with regard to food. So this is a really cool example. There was a strawberry growing competition in 2021. So this is happening right now, held in China, where the top Chinese strawberry farmers were pitted against an AI-enabled team. And the AI team was able to grow twice as many strawberries in the greenhouse as the best strawberry farmers could. So just using a vast number of sensors, which we know are becoming cheap and plentiful, and then algorithms to take that data and turn it into action. The AI guided the human farmers to be twice as effective as they were previously. So that, again, that's the world of prescriptive analytics. When we can give the computer the full set of information and data, we're able to train it using algorithms, and it is able to start to direct human actions to have the highest possible impact. And now I'm going to turn it over to Tim to talk to us a little bit more about how this is taking place directly in the food industry today.
Thanks, Brian. So let's talk a little bit about how prescriptive analytics are coming to life in food innovation and food product development today. So the advent of prescriptive analytics is really the advent of data. What's changing today is the data that's available that's enabling us to make predictions about what products are most likely to be successful in store. Of course, we're always looking to optimize how well an item sells and the distribution that it gets. And historically, we've really only had promotional data, historical brand media spending, brand perceptions, and consumer product feedback to drive those predictions. But today, our predictions about how food items are likely to perform in market have gotten far more precise, in large part due to the availability of packaging data and label data that contains ingredient and nutritional information. So for example, having packaging and messaging data at scale, having product imagery, claims on pack and text, is making incredible impact on our ability to understand the relationship between these attributes and distribution and sales. It's the same with ingredients. What data purveyors are now able to do with decomposing ingredients and turning nutrition labels into data is impacting our ability to impute taste and to account for consumer decision-making on nutritionals. There are also some emerging domains of data that are going to, in the very near term, have a big impact on how products are developed. And we think those are in two big categories. The first one is sensory. So what sensory experiences are brought to life for the consumer through the product itself, through its form, its format, its category, et cetera, and its flavors, of course. And the second one is artwork. What visual stimuli are presented at shelf to get the buyer's attention, the shopper's attention, and to drive trial and repeat. And we think both of these are going to have a big impact on all of the domains on the right side of this page. So some of the things that are happening today, and Brian mentioned this earlier, these really are all happening today through AI. They're just getting better and better, and their use is becoming more widespread. But what's happening is this new data is enabling companies like ours to generate algorithms that enable new profile discovery or trend detection at scale, that enable new flavor discovery, that enable manufacturers of food to optimize packaging and messaging, that enable innovation and R&D to forecast new items at scale or to test ideas much, much earlier in the development pipeline. And they're also enabling investors and corporate development executives to have better guidance on M&A and direct investments in a more precise way. What we're going to talk about is all these applications and what's happening today. So let's start with new profile discovery. This is really the first, best, and broadest use case for AI new product development today. What's happening is that because we can now observe product attributes and product sales data, that is label data and historical product sales, across the entire grocery store simultaneously, is that we can detect trends happening much, much earlier now by looking at a combination of attributes that we call a profile. So for example, products that are relatively high in protein compared to their category, products that are extra sweet compared to the rest of their category, come together as elements that make up a sweet, high protein profile. And what we know from the success in the last decade of categories like meat snacks and Greek yogurt is that this profile has been pretty popular. It's done pretty well. But by the time we detect a successful category or a successful product, it's usually too late. But if we look back in the history of the data, what we recognize is that there are clues about the emergence of the profile happening across multiple categories long before an individual product or an entire category is deemed a success. And that's really what profile detection is all about. It enables companies to find out what the real underlying trends are for consumers and what product attributes are really driving those trends. And so again, the benefit is to be able to look at bundles of product attributes, benefits, tastes, claims, and understand how those come together in a multi-category way. So what are the combinations of features and characteristics of a product that are really driving that hidden success across the grocery store? And the nice thing about this data and having access to it is that you can build the evidence and the business case for a profile. You can start to understand where that profile is driving performance, where it's likely to drive performance in the future, whether it's by class of trade, by banner, or by category, or what the impact of that profile might be if you brought it into a new category. And that's really the big use case we're seeing today. So we can answer the question of, hey, what if we made an organic version of X? Or what if we brought the kind of sweet, smooth flavor profile you get in a Greek yogurt into a category like cream cheese? What would the impact be? Another place where we're seeing AI have a big impact is on the ability to optimize taste, to not only detect flavors that are really likely to be successful, but also to develop recipes that are going to be a big hit with consumers. Today, the best data we've got is really in the middle here. It's really collecting customer reviews at scale, collecting consumer feedback from sources like Facebook, from Amazon reviews, and the like, and using that data at scale to understand how consumers respond to specific flavors, forms, or other multisensory experiences, and then connect that feedback back to product sales and product distribution, and really understand the impact of those flavors and forms on consumer behavior and on spend. What we've done in the past is use live taste testing in a lab and collect that data manually. But for folks who work in R&D or who've done taste testing of food products, you know it's an onerous process. What's going to really break this wide open over the next decade is developing sensors that can actually taste food products in lieu of a human being and predict how a human being is going to receive that multisensory experience. And by the way, this has already happened. So there are startups out there who've developed sensors to help analyze the smell and taste of products, to differentiate between fresh and spoiled lemon juice, to track changes in fermentation during the production of biologic drugs, and to differentiate fruit hybrid strains based on flavor profile. So this stuff is already happening. The technologies are already there. The data collection hasn't quite happened at scale by machine, but we think it's coming. What we know, again, is really impacting flavor development today and flavor discovery today is using consumer feedback online and listening to consumers' responses to different and new multisensory experiences, and then integrating that and using that data to train algorithms to predict what consumers are likely to want. Another place where product innovation is going to really be impacted is on the visual stimulus. It's on the label. Computer vision, which is machines looking at images and evaluating their content, is enabling us to understand what visual cues, what artwork, what colors, and what other visual stimuli have the biggest impact on consumer behavior and on sales. AI can now also compose labels, images, and artwork. It can make packaging personalized to the consumer. It can make it more comprehensive. It can signal help with health and wellness goals. Package development, label development via AI can also create better warnings for product risk, increase nutrition awareness. It can make smarter, safer packaging and make the purchase process, the shopping process, easier and more convenient. So there are big, big applications here for AI, both in terms of the computer seeing the product and understanding the impact of a product label on purchase behavior, and in terms of machines actually composing labels. And in fact, Nutella did this. They designed about 7 million labels with an AI-powered algorithm in a marketing campaign, and they sold those 7 million items in about a month. Another place where we're seeing AI have a huge impact, and this again is one that is just absolutely taking off today, is it's really impacting the front of the innovation funnel and what gets funded, especially by organizations that have significant investments in innovation and R&D. The first thing that AI is enabling us to do in food product development is do forecasting for ideas really early. I said earlier, what if we just make an organic version of product X? What if we just decrease the sugar content in our cookie by 5 grams per serving? What if we just change the label or we add a claim? Answers to those questions can now be had at enormous scale and very quickly. And that's really the biggest benefit of AI and food innovation today is it's enabling innovators, R&D people, founders to really understand what the impact of new product attributes, benefits, claims, and artwork is likely to be if introduced to their product or if brought into a new category.
This solves for one of the classic issues of innovation, where we might have a focus group that says, of course, I want lower calorie chips. But actually, we can simply decompose the performance in the aisle and say, actually, it turns out that full fat chips would do well. If you were to create this product and bring it to market, you might want a different flavor profile that you would get from having more rich content in the ingredient list. So AI is able to break that down, and we're able to understand at the ingredient level by gram what the impact is going to be on consumer consumption.
Another big impact here is that it's really changing, and I think I alluded to this a moment ago, the volume of ideas that can be tested. It really sort of shifts your perspective on the notion of boiling the ocean. Where before, you really didn't want to boil the ocean from an innovation perspective and test every idea you had. Now, with the advent of label data and AI, it's kind of silly not to. You might as well just test everything, because the marginal cost of testing incremental ideas through AI is effectively zero. So it provides tremendous scale in terms of testing ideas for companies. Another big benefit is that using big data and AI to forecast is enabling companies to locate opportunities, to understand which geographies are most likely to adopt their ideas or their products, what banners are most likely to have the strongest performance with new items, what assortments are most likely to be successful on shelf at those banners in those geographies. And you're really also able to figure out which buyers are most likely to take a new item. So that's another big benefit of using AI in this case. The other thing that's changing is when AI is used to forecast, using label information in particular, we're able to change the role of forecasting in an organization from one of idea validation to one of idea optimization. So today, when we run a forecast for a new item in food, we're not just learning what the potential of that item is, but we're learning what the drivers and drags are from an ingredient perspective. What ingredients are really driving the concept? What flavors really drive the concept? And what are the drags? What are some of the things that can be taken out to really design the idea to consumer value and to buyer value? Another benefit is that now we're not just able to optimize product or think about product, but we're able to do the same thing with price and with promotion simultaneously. So we're no longer, for example, looking at a single number forecast, but in fact, we're able to forecast a line. We're able to say, look, at a given level of distribution, at a given price for a specific SKU, this is how we expect it to perform. And this algorithmic forecasting has been accurate to within $1 million of sales for year one for a brand new item. Last, we're also able to understand which messages and benefits have the biggest impact on trial. So when companies are thinking about claims, if you're thinking as an innovator about what core benefits are really going to drive someone to try a product at shelf, we're able to extract that from an AI-based forecasting process. And that's really an enormous shift from historical forecasting processes where the benefits are an input to the test. Here, the benefits are an output. You learn which benefits consumers care about the most, because that consumer benefit data, that consumer feedback is an input into the forecasting. There's an output from the forecasting process, not something you lock and load and input. I want to talk about one more big domain, and And that's investment. That's where the dollars are going in food product innovation. And one of the things that's happening with more accurate item level forecasts is that it's actually enabling investors to project company financial performance in a much more precise way. So as a consequence of that, new products and consequently new startups can be valued much more precisely and frankly much earlier than they could have been valued previously. And that's because what's required to generate a forecast now is not historical sales anymore, but just the product label, a category, and some conception of how it might be distributed. So this product-driven AI is really going to change investing. And again, it already is. Investors can now rapidly value items instead of companies and know which ones have the strongest demand pull. Investors can also figure out which elements, which parts of portfolios can be trimmed and scaled back and don't necessarily have the greatest value or the highest incrementality. Another benefit is the ability to look at an item or brand's value in a new context. So if a product line, for example, is pulled into a portfolio and has new manufacturing, or if the product line is expanded, or if it's sold in a new category, investors can now answer the question of how it will perform in those new contexts. Again, if you change the packaging, if you change the formulation, if you change the flavor, if you adopt a new food sterilization process in your manufacturing, you can now predict the effects of doing that on demand, on consumer demand. And you can also do it very rapidly and at scale. There's no reason to engage expensive consultants anymore on this topic. You can simply consult the data. And the ability to do that is helping investors make decisions much, much more quickly. Other big questions that investors are asking today and that they're using AI to solve are around whether or not brands can hold price and what will happen if product prices change. So price-based forecasting is a critical use case for AI. And then another question about expanding distribution. If we change the distribution of an item, or if we change its category, from a brand perspective, if we bring a brand into a new category, what's likely to happen? What is the impact going to be? Investors can now, again, do this at scale and do this across a large number of items and do it very quickly. And the implication of all this is that the business development cycle is going to be much faster. Investments will be able to be made by bigger investors much earlier. And I think the risk is that there might be an arms race between founders and investors to understand the drivers of strong ideas and to understand what really makes a concept great. That is to say, the best data will probably have a pretty big advantage in these negotiations. And so, you know, I appreciate that for founders and as a founder myself, this is a bit of a scary concept, but again, it's already happening. And, you know, investors could, for example, look across the show floor at Expo West. Hopefully we're back in person next year and understand the value of the items on the floor, what each item is going to do on the shelf under different distribution scenarios, and also to understand what distribution scenarios are most likely for all those items. So it's a really, really big opportunity. It's a huge application for AI in food product development and in funding of food product development. And for manufacturers, it's going to help them understand the relative value of building versus buying, whether or not it makes more sense to spend the money to build something, or whether you should go out and invest or partner or borrow to bring a new proposition to the consumer. So I just want to go back to this concept of what's really enabling all of this. What's really underlying this. And again, it's really the data that's making all of these things possible. When you start to bring label attributes, nutrition attributes, claims, packaging artwork, and sensory data, and you use that information to train algorithms against historical sales and distribution information, you're able to create an incredibly powerful algorithm that can generate these new profiles, detect these new profiles across hundreds of categories in the grocery store, that can discover new flavors that'll have a significant impact on categories that haven't had those flavor profiles previously, that can help optimize packaging and messages, that can forecast new items at scale with fantastic precision, and that can provide investors with guidance on M&A or build versus buy in a way that's much faster, much more precise, and really helps guide the business development process unlike ever before. So again, it's really the advent of the data that's enabling all this and making this possible. Last point, and then we'll close for questions, and we'll be available in the chat and of course at our booth, is that this is already happening. We know this works, and it's happening because we're doing it today across these 5 dimensions and using this data, and we've seen the impact. And we wanted to share this as a kind of forecast for what we think the industry will look like over the next few years as companies, investors, manufacturers start to pivot toward using AI to help make some of these decisions earlier in their innovation processes, their business development processes, or their R&D processes. So we're really, really excited about this. We think it's an incredible frontier. We're excited for the emerging data that's coming around sensory and product artwork using computer vision. And we think this is going to be just an incredible, incredible time for food innovation over the next few years. So again, I'm Tim Joyce from ZS, here with my colleague, Brian Thompson. Thanks to everybody for joining us today, for spending time with us. We're looking forward to your comments in the chat and connecting with you at our booth.